Welcome back to another episode. This one feels a little bit different to normal in that I'm going to start by talking about a perspective shift and kind of mindset, and then share some advice on how to implement this shift. But then I'm also going to talk a little bit more personally because I have just been through the ringer a little bit of experiencing a lot of struggle in my own learning and studying. So I want to talk about that because I recently finished a qualification and it was the hardest thing I've done in a long time. And it was actually probably harder than my entire degree that I did in terms of what it did in my brain, what it stirred up. So if you want to hear about my sad little story that then turned around, then keep listening. So this episode is all about what to do when studying feels hard, when it feels impossible, or maybe it's not feeling too bad for you right now, but you know that there are those moments, right? Everyone has them. Even the best student has those moments where studying feels hard. And so what do you do in those moments to get over the hard? Because sometimes you haven't really got that many options, right? You either quit or you keep going. And this perspective shift that I want to share with you is the thing that helped me keep going, and I think could help you as well. So could be useful for you right now, or something for you to just keep in your pocket for when you need it. Okay, so let's say it's Thursday night and you've just got home from work and it's been a long, draining week, and you know that you need to study. You had it on your plan that you were going to study this evening, but you are knackered, right? Your brain feels fried, and honestly, all you want to do is just lie on the sofa, watch Netflix, or just have a bath and get an early night. And you might be then thinking, studying tonight just feels too hard. I'll do it at the weekend. And that makes sense in the moment, but then what happens next? Now, throughout this kind of episode, I want to make it clear that the decision point isn't always that you have to do the studying, right? Because sometimes you do just need to, for your own sanity, sack it off and do it later. But sometimes that doesn't actually work, because let's say that Thursday evening you decide, nope, studying tonight feels too hard, I'm not going to do it. You might be able to just switch that off, or you might carry that weight of guilt throughout the evening of, you're technically resting, you're technically relaxing, but you're not really fully there, right? You're thinking, oh, I should have been studying. Like, oh my God, that's really annoying because now I'm going to have to study later. And Friday comes, maybe you then spend a bit of brain space on Friday anticipating the backlog that you've created, and that tension might start to kind of spill over. Then your weekend is different, right? You might have not been planning on studying that weekend, or only studying for a bit, and then you've actually got to find more time to carve out, or you don't, and then that backlog just keeps going and going and going, right? The issue here is that studying is hard, right? Studying feels hard. There's a lot of resistance, there's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of discomfort in it, but also not studying is hard too, right? And this is where the mindset shift comes in, of you're not choosing between the hard thing and the easy thing. You're actually choosing between two different kinds of hard. And so when people talk about instant gratification and delaying gratification in that way, that's kind of what they're talking about. Sometimes you choose what feels easy now, which is sometimes not studying, and then you're pushing the hard down the track, really. I quite often notice it when I've told myself I'm going to get up and go to the gym in the morning, and then I don't because it feels too hard in that moment. And sometimes that's the right decision. Maybe I didn't have enough time and I had other things I should be doing, but that hard kind of carries on, right? And so it's not an either or. We don't just get to pick the easy things in life, right? Sometimes not doing the thing has hard stuff about it as well. So I want to give a few examples of this. Let's say starting your essay, right? You know that starting your essay early is a good idea. You know that when you start it early, you have more time to work on it, less panic, less stress. But when it is a kind of quiet Sunday afternoon and maybe the sun is shining, or everyone else that you know seems to be going and doing nice fun things, you look at that, you think, okay, right, yeah, am I going to go and open my laptop now and open that blank document and invite the resistance and the discomfort in? But something in your body resists. It feels hard because you're giving up precious rest time. You might have that voice in your head that's like, but it's the weekend, I should be resting, and then the week starts again tomorrow and I need to feel refreshed. Maybe the actual task itself seems hard. The question, like you had a quick glance over it before, it feels quite confusing, or it feels quite big and mammoth. Maybe you've got some self-doubt in there with, past feedback or lower grades than you want just floating around in your mind. Starting early often means sitting with that discomfort of not knowing what you're doing yet. So you delay. You think, no, I won't do it now. Like, you know what? I'm going to rest today and then I'll start my essay tomorrow. And, sometimes that is the congruent decision. And you're like, you know what? That is what I'm going to do. And sometimes that does feel right. Like I will sometimes want to work on a Sunday, and then I know that like I just need to give myself a bit of brain space. So instead I go and do things that I know will help me out in the week. Like I'll go meal prep and I'll do all my laundry and, but I am kind of choosing one hard over another really, because then I've got more work to do in the week. So delaying has its own costs, right? Because if you don't start your essay, then your anxiety is likely going to rise as that deadline creeps closer. There's less time for working on it, editing, reviewing, polishing. There's greater likelihood of rushing and submitting something that you're not proud of. And then you have that guilt of pushing it off again. Like, yes, it is hard or was hard to start early, but maybe it was actually harder to be stuck in that dread cycle every single day, knowing that you were running out of time. Another example could be revising early, right? Let's say you have an exam coming up and you know that revising bit by bit is smarter than cramming, but the payoff is so delayed, right? If you've got an exam even in a month's time, but sometimes you don't have exams until the end of a module or the end of a semester. Like it can be really hard to feel motivated in that moment because it demands effort now without an immediate return. It competes with other tasks that are probably more urgent. It competes with other life responsibilities. It's difficult to prioritize when an exam feels far away. So you might think, it'll be fine. I'll just start properly a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks before. But the reality is that has other hard consequences, because it might be harder because you've forgotten things that you learned earlier. So you have to spend more time going over them. It might be harder because you don't have time to revise strategically. You just have to try and do everything because you haven't really got time to make a smart plan. And it's harder because those few weeks before the exam, like you can't, fully erase exam stress, but those few weeks before the exam are probably going to be pretty friggin' awful, right? Because you are panicked and rushing and just feeling stressed. And then maybe the result isn't as great. The hard of slow, steady revision isn't fun, but the hard of cramming, the panic, the poor sleep, the second guessing most of your answers, that's probably harder. Final example before I crack on with my story is maybe you are thinking about emailing your tutor for help. So you're a few weeks into a module, you've read the assignment brief a few times and you still don't really understand what it's asking of you. Or maybe you're struggling to meet the deadline and you could really use an extension, but you hesitate because asking for help is hard. It feels vulnerable. You might worry that it makes you look weak or incapable. If you're carrying imposter syndrome, even writing that email might feel terrifying, but not asking has its own kind of hard. You might end up kind of just plowing on and then writing something that's not quite aligned with the question. So you write it, it's off track. So you just aren't going to get as many marks. You might miss out on getting support or an extension that you genuinely qualify for and would find helpful. And, you keep struggling along when help was actually available to not feel so alone. So how do you choose the hard? And I think part of this is just recognizing that there isn't only one hard option, that doing the thing isn't the only kind of element that has hard things attached to it. So the awareness is important here that, actually maybe not doing the thing, or maybe the flip side of that thing also has its own hard. And so then we want to reflect on that a little bit of, actually, I'm not choosing between hard and easy. I'm choosing which hard I am more willing to carry, I'm more willing to experience. And so you can try asking yourself, what feels hard about doing the thing right now? What feels hard about starting my essay, studying after work, starting revision, reaching out for help? What feels hard about doing that? And then try and flip it around. What would be hard about not doing it? What would be hard about putting it off or delaying it? And which hard are you willing to sit with? And so that's where it's kind of, you might have to play it out of, okay, so if I don't do it now, then I have to do it when? When am I going to do that? How's that going to feel? And if I don't do it then, because I know what I'm like, I'm going to have to do it then. And then how's that going to feel? So you can kind of play it out and think which hard actually is kind of worse in the long run. And then also have a think about what support would make the hard feel less hard, right? Is there people that you can ask for help or support who can answer questions and help you come up with a plan? Or, maybe there's just people who can make the hard feel less hard in terms of giving you some company. So in my membership, the Kick Butt Students Club, we run virtual study sessions every week. And so when it's feeling hard, the students know that they can come along to those study sessions. And obviously the hard isn't getting erased because I'm not doing the work for them, but it feels less hard because they've got company. And this kind of shift from choosing the hard moves you from that stuck point to actually feeling empowered. And that brings us to my story. So I recently finished my training to become a specialist study skills tutor for adult learners with specific learning differences. It's very much a mouthful, but it pretty much means that I am now have kind of done the qualification that goes alongside the 9 years of experience I have. And I'm now specifically trained to help students who have dyslexia or ADHD. And like I said, hardest thing I've done in years, probably hardest academic thing I've ever done. Now, I started the course years ago. I think it was maybe 2021, the end of 2021 or something like that. And I did the first bit. So the initial training and then the assignments, and it felt hard in just doing that, really, because the way the course was structured, I was kind of alone in it, which I wasn't really expecting. I did my degree through the Open University, and while it was 100% the best choice for me, I felt quite alone. Right. It's why I have this business and I run my own studying membership, because I felt alone while I was doing it. And so when I thought, any future education I do, I will find a way to do it so that I have company. And that wasn't the case with this course. Other than an initial kind of, I think it was 2 days on Zoom, I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't see anyone. I didn't know anyone that was on my course. So that was quite tricky. And I also had a bit of imposter syndrome in that, like I said, I've been doing this for 9 years. I've been helping students for 9 years, but I've come at it from a different way. So a lot of the people who were on this course, they had teaching backgrounds. They were fully qualified teachers. And so some of the terminology, but also just how the system works, like they were quite hot on it. Like they were kind of learning new skills, whereas I felt like some of the skills I'd already developed through doing this, but I was lacking in the knowledge. And so I was stressing out about it, really. And then it came to the final part, which was the teaching practice and then the mammoth portfolio. And I got stuck. And it really threw me that I got stuck. And I think it was really flipping hard. And it's interesting because I didn't really talk to many people about this. Like, I had the excitement of me sharing that I was doing this qualification and that I'd done the assignments and I'd like got through them and I'd passed them all. But I didn't really share with many people that I was stuck because I couldn't quite understand it either. And my mental health wasn't that great anyway. There was other stuff going on, but this course just became this hard thing in my life that I just couldn't work out how to get around. And then I kind of had these feelings of like, well, I was kind of running out of time, and I ended up deferring the final project a few times, which I'm very lucky that the course provider let me do that. But that kind of also made it worse because, yes, it felt hard in that moment to try and push through and finish this qualification because my mental health wasn't great. The time I did have available, I really needed to focus on my business because I am self-employed. So if my business doesn't make money, I am screwed. So I was kind of then like weighing it up of, do I dedicate loads of time to this qualification when I am really stressed out about it, or do I put it off? So I put it off. And that then meant that I was kicking the hard down the line. And that kind of made it worse because those worries of feel like imposteriness or feeling like some of the material like wasn't going in, that obviously got worse the more I deferred, because then it was ages since I'd read the books, and it was ages since I'd kind of been in that field, right? If you don't do anything for a while, you forget it. So it was getting harder and harder. I was actually reaping the hard rewards of putting it off. And now I have a lot of self-kindness because I understand that I was doing the best I could. But at the time, I was so annoyed at myself. I was so annoyed. Like, it felt like I was protecting myself, but it just became harder and harder and harder. And I knew, I'd been told by the provider that I had a final deadline. Like, I had to submit my whole portfolio and complete all of the teaching practice I had to do by a certain date earlier this year. And so I knew it was coming, and I still delayed because I was just in a moment of just panic, and it was affecting my sleep. I felt like I was kind of getting through the day by just burying my head in the sand, and then I'd get to go to bed, and then the wave of dread would hit me of, Chloe, you actually need to do this and you're not doing it. Like, oh my goodness, what is wrong with you? So that was really not great. And then it kind of came to a bit of a head where I'd booked myself a massage because, if you cannot tell by my story, I was chronically stressed by this. And I booked myself a massage thinking this is going to help. This is going to help clear my head, and I'm going to know what to do. I'm going to know how to move forward. And I ended up crying halfway through this massage. And the woman was very nice about it. She said, this happens all the time. Massages stir up weird things in the body. And it kind of was like my crux point of, okay, I actually need to sort this out now. I've been experiencing the hard of actually just being in limbo. Like I was supposedly doing the thing. Like I told the provider, like, yep, I'm going to meet that deadline, but I actually wasn't doing the thing. So I had a very big reckoning with myself of, do I walk away or do I commit and actually get this done? And so this was where the choosing the hard came in of, okay, both options don't feel great right now. Of if I do the thing, I'm going to have to reach out for help from the provider and tell them I've gotten myself in a pickle. I'm going to need a little bit of help to work out a plan and just like kind of get me back in the game, and just a little bit of support to be like, right, here's the 179 tasks I have to do. Like, does this look right? Let me go. Like, let me crack on. So I had to sit with that hard because I had this like negative fantasy in my mind of, I'm going to email them and ask for help, and they're going to reply and tell me that I'm a piece of crap and that they don't want me finishing the course. Like, of course that wasn't going to happen, but that was my fear, because I don't like having to lean on people for help in that way and risk that. So there was that hard, and knowing like, if I actually commit to this, this is going to take so much time. I'm going to have to hustle. However, I actually was seriously faced by the question of like, well, do I just quit? Right. And that was hard as well, because I'm like, well, I've put all that effort in to the qualifications so far, and that would just go completely. I'd have to live with the regret of it. And regret is not something I do well with. It would just be an open loop in my mind forever. And it would then annoy me of like, oh, I could have got that qualification. Then there was also I feel like that would actually stoke the imposter syndrome, because that would be embarrassing to kind of, if anyone ever asked me like, hey, whatever happened with that qualification? And I'd have to be like, oh, yeah, I didn't do it. And that just doesn't sit well with me when I literally run a business where people pay me to tell them how to study more effectively and efficiently. So that also didn't feel great. And then also I built a lot of plans and ideas of what I'm going to do in my business and my career with this qualification. So just laying it all out and actually being honest with myself and seeing that every single option, it was all hard. And actually that was kind of freeing in a way, that it wasn't that I was just like having to, I was choosing an easy option. It didn't feel like either of them were easy. And that made it easier for me to be like, okay, I am choosing to go all in here. So I did I reached out for support. I went through all of the material and was like, right, what am I actually doing? Because I've really forgotten all of this. And I worked out, all of my tasks, and I reached out to my supervisor and I told her, I really want to get this done and I'm panicking and I just would really appreciate some help. And surprise, surprise, she was helpful. And I got to book in some of the tutorials, like the one-to-ones that I'd never actually booked in with her. And so that was helpful. And then I had to knuckle down. And that was a very hard few months for sure. It took up so much of my time. And then the few weeks before the submission date, because this portfolio was ginormous, the file that I ended up submitting was 57,000 words, which is utterly wild, right? Like I could have written a second book with those words. And so it was a lot. And a lot of those words actually got written in the final 2 weeks, which definitely I will talk about at some point, of how on earth was I able to write that many words in such a short amount of time. And I've definitely got some kind of tips and strategies and things that I will share in future episodes, because I think I've mastered it. I can write essays pretty flipping quickly now because I know the skills, but that's not the point of this. In those last few weeks, I was unbelievably stressed. The few people that I saw or spoke to, like my friends' family, they will know that it was bad. Like I sent my friend Paulina a voice note like 3 days before it was due. And she was like, Chloe, could you give me a warning about that voice note? Because you pretty much just sent me a voice note of you in a depressed, crying hole, and that actually wasn't the nicest thing to listen to on a Friday morning. So they knew how awful I was, what I was going through. I literally didn't have time to sleep or eat or worry. I just had to get it done. And the thing that really kind of cemented this perspective for me was that, and the thing that was actually quite surprising, is that the hard of finishing was utterly exhausting, but it felt purposeful. And that hard was so much easier than the previous hard where I was not doing the thing. Like the hard of not doing it had been crushing. This constant pit of dread in my stomach, the sleep I couldn't get, the guilt I couldn't shake was nothing. Like that was so awful compared to the hard of actually finishing. Like what I was doing was hard because it was time consuming and it was stressful and I didn't have time to be perfect about anything or overthink. I literally just had to type, tick it off the list, do the next thing. Like it was a definite rush and struggle to the finish line. And before I've really, I don't know, that hard has felt insurmountable, but I had a really clear comparison that the hard of doing the thing in this instant was so much better than the hard of not doing the thing. And that was the big breakthrough for me. And actually, since then, I've had to do hard things, but I've got such a good reminder in my head of but it's nowhere near as hard as what you just did, Chloe. So buckle up and just get on with it. And that's really helpful to have that. But that's the kind of perspective and story that I wanted to share with you today, that studying is always going to involve challenges. I can't remove those from you, because all of you, anyone who is furthering their education, getting a qualification, getting knowledge and skills that you don't already have, you are pushing yourself out of your comfort zone all the time. And when you're pushing yourself out of that comfort zone, you're stretching that comfort zone, you are experiencing resistance. And that will show up in different ways, depending on what else you've got going on in life, depending on your history of studying and your mindset around it. It's hard stuff, it's stirring stuff. So I can't remove the hard completely, but maybe this perspective shift could help you reframe it and realize that actually not doing the thing is also really flipping hard. And I also wanted to share this story to make it clear that I am not perfect, right? I do not have everything sorted out. Life in general, definitely not. But in terms of studying and learning, I don't have everything figured out. And so, I've talked before about my struggles when I was a student doing my degree, but I don't think I talk about it enough. And so if you're, fairly new to my world, maybe you're not aware that I was not a perfect student at school and that I really, really struggled with studying. And I almost got kicked out of sixth form because they thought I was going to fail and, all of this stuff. And this was a very useful reminder to me that learning is hard. And I'm hoping it's also kind of, I don't know, maybe I told one of my students that I work with one-on-one quite closely, and she was like, you know what, Chloe, she was like, I know this sounds bad, but I immediately feel better. She's like, I'm sorry you went through that, but that's actually made me feel a lot better. And she said it makes her feel like I'm going to have more empathy for her. And I'm like, yeah, studying is hard. And I'm glad that I've had this reconnection to the hard, but that also you can see that, the hard is kind of inevitable, but we can make the hard feel that little bit easier with this perspective, maybe. And so I just want to finish this episode by reminding you that you can do hard things. And sometimes it's just about choosing which one you're going to lean into rather than trying to avoid any hardness. And then I also just want to share some of the free tools and resources that I have available to support you in your studying. So if you are currently on a study break, then you can download my Intentional Study Break workbook that will help you plan a study break, whether you have a few weeks or a few months off, that blends joy, rest, and gentle intention so that you can return to studying feeling recharged. If you are actively studying right now, then I would recommend that you grab my study session planners if you haven't already. These help you stay focused, motivated, and organized during every single study session so that you make real progress without burning out. You get more done in less time each week. And if you're struggling with your essays, then I would recommend getting my Better Essays Sentence Starters. So that is 50 prompts and sentence starters that will help you go from the blank page to stronger, clearer, more academic sounding writing fast. So I'm going to pop all of the links into the episode description and into the show notes. So definitely grab those. But leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube if you've found this episode helpful, or feel free to strike up a conversation with me over on Instagram. Come into my DMs at chloe.burroughs. And yeah, I hope this episode has felt helpful, maybe empowering, that, when studying feels impossible, we can't just wait around until it feels easier, because that may not come. And instead, just pause and ask yourself, which hard am I choosing right now? Because you may not be able to remove the hard entirely, but you can choose the hard that actually leads you forward to where you want to go. And, you never have to carry it alone. There's always support out there. Okay, thank you so much for listening or watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.